Torah Resource is made possible through the generous donations of people like you. If you would like to help us continue to produce this kind of material, please consider making a donation at TorahResource.com.
Okay, we're back for another Torah portion. And this week we have the heavy hitter, Ki Tisa, when you count, Exodus 30, verse 11 through chapter 34, 35. And the associated, the associated passages, 1 Kings 18, 1 through 39. 2 Corinthians 9, 6 through 11. If you'd like to see the list that I am reading and be able to see what Torah portions are coming up in the one-year cycle, you can go to TorahResource.com. It's right there on the homepage. I think it's actually the second thing down. Just click on those and you can download those. And so of course we have the golden calf incident in this passage, and it is kind of a monster of a passage that we're not going to be able to get to everything. Starts out with the census and moves into different things for the tent of meeting, right? Different things that Bezalel is going to make, and then into the golden calf incident. Now, I think two things that I'd like to bring up. I'll bring them up first, and then you can hash out whatever else you want to. And I know that this is backwards from what we normally do. Normally you take it. But anyway, so I was reading last night, and this really caught my eye. In 32:5, it says, when Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and this is the golden calf. So he builds an altar before the golden calf. So he makes the golden calf out of the earrings and all the gold that Israel has. And it says, when Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord. Now, in the Hebrew, if you read in the Hebrew, you'll notice that feast to the Lord is actually a feast to Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, which I thought was very interesting, because I always just thought that he makes some new calf or whatever that is a throwback to a god from Egypt. But it seems to me after reading this, it seems to me what Aaron is actually doing is he's attempting to make a physical representation of what Yod-Heh Vav-Heh is for the people. The same kind of idolatry that we see even today in things like, Buddhism and Hinduism, where they make a statue and then you offer to this god and the god will come towards the statue or come into the statue and whatnot. It's not that. It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Rob, it seems to me like what he's actually doing is he's not trying to necessarily steer people away from Yod-Heh Vav-Heh in the way that I have always thought, but rather he's attempting to make a physical representation of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point, because if you look just back to, let's see here, Aaron's earlier speech. So just starting with verse 2 of chapter 32, he says, Aaron said to them, give me your gold earrings, etc. And then it says, this is your God, Israel. So at the end of
who brought you out of Egypt?
4, yeah. This is strange, because in Hebrew it says, Ele Elohecha Yisrael. These, and so this is strange, like right. These are your God who brought you, He'eluka, who brought you up. But then he built an altar in front of it. I'm not sure if Aaron, I think one aspect here is Aaron is confused. So what's being exposed here is Aaron's incapacities as a leader. He's not rooted in the truth. He's not grounded in sound theology at this moment.
Right.
And he's normally teamed up with Moses, and right. Moses shoulders that. Moses is the grounding force. You know what I mean? Because he's the vessel. He's the one who's most humble in all the earth. He's the one who God is literally sustaining him supernaturally for 40 days and 40 nights while he receives all this instruction. Aaron believes in God, but he's still being shaped by God. And so what's exposed here with Moses' absence, Aaron is like scrambling. It's like the head pastor's away, and then something, and then like something
And the
goes down.
The youth pastor has to preach. Oh no!
But it's not only that, something goes down socially,
Right.
in the body of the church while the senior pastor's away. And you've got, the guy who helps, the assistant pastor who's like, he just doesn't know how to handle it. And so he's trying to like do the best he can. And so what's exposed is that incapacity of the human heart to handle these kinds of pushes from the enemy to try to corrupt worship. And I think I see it as a kind of it's an first example of supersessionism. They're trying to say, because it's stealing the story that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh brought Israel out of Egypt.
Yeah, the true
And
God, right? Yeah.
It's taking the story of the true God and redirecting it away from Moses and the revelation of Sinai, and making it, the 10 words already said, you shall not do this, right? I mean, they already heard, even though they don't have the tablets yet, they heard this commandment. And so this goes in hand. If we can go backtrack, I know you had another point, but I think this is a good segue back to 31, is 31:1. I have called Betzalel, the son of Uri, etc. I have filled him with the Spirit of God.
Elohim, yeah.
Yeah, Ruach Elohim, with wisdom, with understanding, and knowledge in all kinds of work. Right? And then in verse 6, I myself have appointed him with a Aholiav, etc. And in the hearts of all who are skillful, I have put wisdom, that's Chokhmah, so that they may make kol asher tziviticha, everything that I've commanded you. So we know that Betzalel and Aholiav they're not part of this. God's telling Moses, I've already given them the spirit of wisdom. So this is what we have in contrast then are the humans just reacting according to their sinful nature. And then we have humans whom God has divinely, sovereignly prepared with his spirit to accomplish his will. It's like one is just scrambling, blah, 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 blah. We're going to making stuff up, making, because it's just coming out of the corrupt human heart. And they don't have, it's on one side you have the Spirit of God, at the other side you have the void of the Spirit of God.
There's a contrast there. Yeah. The golden calf incident, actually, so on our...
And also, if I may make, this is how God guarantees he's going to get his tabernacle built.
Right.
Like there's no scenario where God says, have them bring all this stuff to you and they're going to make me a mishkan and here's the dimensions, da-da-da. It's not like God just, okay, humans, you have free will, so just be real good at, hopefully you're going to listen to my instructions and build this thing right. And when I come and inspect it, hopefully it's going to be up to spec. That's not it at all. God guaranteed that he's going to get it. Why? Because he's moving hearts. He's moving hearts. And some people, they might not like to think that Betzalel did not have free will here. God just puts the Spirit of God in him and says he's going to build what you tell him.
Yep. So on our show, Messiah Matters, if you don't watch our show, you can always go find us on YouTube. Messiah Matters is the show, and we're on all major podcast platforms as well. But on our last show, 506, I talked about, I'm sure that I talked about the Catholic Church, and I got some pushback on it. Some people said, "Oh, I can't believe that you believe that people in the Catholic Church are saved." My comment was not a blanket comment that all Catholics are saved, but rather that I believe that there are people in the Catholic Church who are, they're just doing what they've been taught, but they believe that Yeshua has come and dealt with the sin problem, and that he's the one who has paid the price for them, and so on and so forth. And that there are people, maybe, I'm not saying there's a lot or that there's a few or whatever. I'm just saying I think that there are some people in the Catholic Church that are saved. And I got some pushback on this. And one person said to me, I can't believe that you would think that an idolater, the Catholic Church is idolatry. I can't believe that you would think that an idolater would be saved. And my response to that is this passage, to look at Aaron. Aaron builds the golden calf, convinces, it tells Israel to worship it. It tells Israel that this is their God. And then what happens? He's the priest, right? I mean, God uses him as the high priest in the tabernacle.
And God has already appointed him to be the priest. Right. Moses knows something about Aaron that Aaron himself does not yet know.
Right.
And this it's so beautiful because this it's not based on our works, right? That's exactly why. It's like in Colossians where it says there's no Scythian or barbarian or like you could throw Catholic in there, Right. It's like or probably, Buddhist even, or you could put other. Why? Because God pulls people from somewhere,
from sin,
and he pulls people from everywhere, right? It's
we need to pause and say I'm not. That's not to. I understand what Rob's saying. We're not saying that Buddhists are saved, and we're not saying that.
No,
the
it
Catholic
just means
Church
that the covenant, His promise, we are not to withhold.
That God pulls hearts and that he pulls people out of their sin. And actually, the other thing that we need to say about that is, during the early stages of the quote unquote church, you had the Jews going one way and rejecting Christ altogether. You had then a split in the 1000s or around the 1000s of the church, which resulted in the Catholic Church and the Eastern Church. But before that, you had the Catholic Church. Right around, during this time, you didn't have a large choice. You couldn't go to a Baptist church down the road. There wasn't, a bunch of factions. You were either part of the Eastern or the Western Church. That was it. And yet, somehow, God carries the truth of his word through all of this, and there are people who come out who are saved, who are his chosen people. Once again, this is not to say that the Catholic Church at the time was all saved, or that that they were teaching the right thing, or that they weren't teaching idolatry. They were teaching idolatry. There's no doubt about it. But my point simply is that there's always a remnant, right? There's always people. There's a remnant that continues to know and practice the truth. And whether that is people from the Catholic Church, like a Wycliffe or a Tyndale or a Luther or whoever it might be out of the Reformers. Or whether it's today, my point is simply that God chooses those whom he will justify.
Right, and he chose just like Saul of Tarsus.
Right.
Yeshua had already purchased him on the cross. And that's why Paul writes in Galatians is he loved me and gave himself for me. So
while you were still dead in your trespasses and sin, he made us alive together with him. Yeah.
Same thing with Aaron.
Yeah.
Same thing with Aaron. That, yes, it's true that Aaron lost his grounding and he got swept away into this idolatrous, huge tidal wave or whatever, whirlpool, whatever you want to call it. But God had already had a task for Aaron. That means God took it on himself to resolve the contradiction there. And that ultimately, that is the covering of Messiah's blood. That's the gap filler, if you will. Maybe not the greatest analogy, but.
So I want to move to 33:11. Vediber Adonai el Moshe panim el panim. Right? God spoke to Moses face to face, and then as a friend speaks with a friend. I wrote an article on this, which was really a bad article, which is why I never published it. It really was not very well done. But in that article, actually, my father said, you've changed my mind on this. I don't. The reason it was a bad article is because you can't prove this one way or the other. But I'm pretty convinced that this is a declaration that there was a pre-incarnate Yeshua speaking to Moses in his tent. Now the glory of God comes down, right? So we have what seems to be the physical representation of the glory of God, Holy Spirit, however you want to say that, whatever you might believe of that, comes down onto the tent on Moses' tent. but then he speaks to him face to face as a friend speaks to a friend. I think that this is one of the biggest. We have other places too, right? Abraham speaks to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh face to face, and feeds him and whatnot, and then goes and looks at Sodom and Gomorrah with him. So we have a pre-incarnate Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh somehow. But I think what's happening here is that, and Paul alludes to this in 2 Corinthians, I believe it's 2 Corinthians 3, right? He had to put a veil over his face so that Israel wouldn't see the glory of Yeshua. They wouldn't see the cross. In other words, they wouldn't put the dots together, which that's a whole nother topic that we could talk about. But it's my opinion that this right here is a speaking of pre-incarnate Yeshua that Moses is speaking with and receiving the law from.
Well, we know that there's some sort of to the transfiguration that Moses is there speaking with Yeshua.
Right.
Why is not Moses on his face in worship? And why are we even, it's because there's a proximity here. There's an intimacy. There's a connection that Moses is not surprised by the cross. That he and Elijah are talking to him about the stuff that's going to happen. That means they already know about it. Yep. It's pretty mind blowing. And
actually, what's really interesting is that he's speaking to him on the Mount of Transfiguration. He's speaking to him as a friend, right? And this actually, I was thinking about this past week. I know the Lord very well as the King. I know the Lord very well as my God and my King. But, there is a friendship there as well. There is a friendship there as well that it's not just this, we bow to the King, but there is a friendship there. And it's something that I think
I think touches on this koinonia idea, that you have koinonia with one another and with Yeshua. Is that there is a familial connectivity that is based on his love for us. I mean, that's why in Hebrews it says, he's not ashamed to call us his brothers. Yeah, good stuff.
Okay, well, we can. This passage is such a monster passage, and honestly, I think that if you're a teacher, if you're a pastor, if you're leading a small group, there is no shortage of material here. You can find notes on a lot of notes actually on this passage because my father Tim Hague has gone through the 3-year cycle. So if you go look at the 3-year cycle. This passage is broken up into multiple different sections. So he has notes on each one of those sections. So there's plenty of notes that you can find for free on TorahResource.com if you are looking to go deeper and if you're teaching or if you just want to study on your own. Plenty there. We hope that the comments and the conversations that we have on these passages just hash out a couple of ideas that will spark some ideas for you and maybe spark some conversation. Whether you agree with us or not, that doesn't matter. It's more just trying to get the juices flowing so that conversation can be had for you. Go to TorahResource.com. You can find all sorts of resources there on the Torah itself. Also, if you'd like to help support the ministry and help support us continuing to do this kind of stuff, you can donate there as well. And we will be back next week for another parashah. Thanks so much.